What if everything you've been told about America's size has actually been an understatement? Imagine discovering that one American national park is larger than 19 European countries combined in everyday conversation. How many other things about America have the world misunderstood for years? As thousands of European visitors arrived for the 2026 World Cup, many realized the biggest surprise wasn't inside the stadiums. It was the country itself. America broke the map. The first reaction was not cheering, laughing, or reaching for a camera. It was the stare people usually reserve for a restaurant bill that seems to contain an extra zero. Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve covers roughly 53,321 square kilometers, which means one protected American landscape is larger than 19 European countries. For visitors who had just spent the 2026 World Cup discovering that America looked very different from the version they had absorbed through television and social media, this number felt like one final plot twist.
This is the largest national park in the United States. Wrangell St. Elias National Park is over 13 million acres, but only less than 1% of it is accessible by road. We're driving one of two roads into the park to the town of McCarthy. But before you get to McCarthy Road, you'll come to a little town called Chitina, which is where we decided to camp for the night, where we saw so many bald eagles and gulls down by the river feasting on salmon.
An Italian traveler might reasonably say that calling Wrangell St. Elias a park feels almost mischievous. In Rome, people can walk from the Colosseum to the Spanish Steps and pass layers of civilization within a single afternoon. In Alaska, someone can travel for hours and still appear to be standing inside the opening scene. The mountains keep rising, the glaciers keep stretching, and the horizon behaves like a checkout line at Costco on Saturday. Every time you think you have reached the end, another section appears. A visitor from Slovakia would have an even more personal reason to pause. Slovakia covers around 49,035 square kilometers, meaning the entire country is smaller than this American national park. That is a difficult fact to process when your idea of a park involves marked paths, nearby villages, and perhaps a cafe where someone has already placed flowers on every table. Wrangell St. Elias offers a different arrangement. Here, nature has the larger office, the better view, and apparently no intention of scheduling a meeting with humanity. The comparison becomes even stranger with Estonia, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. Estonia covers about 45,227 square kilometers, while mainland Denmark is roughly 42,933. The Netherlands occupies around 41,850, and Switzerland about 41,285. A Dutch visitor, accustomed to a country where nearly every meter seems carefully planned, drained, connected, or given its own bicycle lane, may look across this Alaskan wilderness and realize that America has preserved an area larger than his entire homeland without filling it with apartment blocks, train stations, or 3 different bins for recycling. That contrast matters because many European visitors arrive for the World Cup expecting America to feel chaotic, harsh, and exhausted by its own size. Instead, they encountered enormous stadiums, friendly strangers, national parks protected on a scale that seemed almost fictional, and a culture far warmer than the headlines had promised. After several weeks, some began joking that returning home would require emotional paperwork. Wrangell St. Elias changed the conversation because it made America's size feel generous rather than excessive. This was not empty land waiting to be sold. It was land deliberately left wild, difficult, and magnificent. One imagined Swiss reaction captures it perfectly. We are proud of our Alps, but America gave the mountains their own country and called it a park. By then, the European visitors were no longer asking whether the map was correct. They were asking how many more things about America they had misunderstood before arriving. Nature owns everything. After the map shock wears off, a second realization begins to settle in, and this one reaches much deeper than simple size. Wrangell St. Elias is not merely larger than Belgium, Albania, Slovenia, or Montenegro. It is a place where America has deliberately allowed nature to remain in charge. For many European visitors, that idea feels almost radical, because the continent they come from has spent centuries shaping nearly every valley, riverbank, and mountain pass around human life.
It's another fucking beautiful day in Alaska. This time I'm in a national park you have probably never heard of. This is Wrangell St. Elias over by the Yukon border, and this is the largest fucking national park in the entire country. It is 13 million acres, which is 6 times the size of Yellowstone National Park.
A Belgian traveler might look at the figure of 53,321 square kilometers and immediately compare it with Belgium's roughly 30,528. His country contains Brussels, Antwerp, Ghent, Bruges, national highways, rail networks, farms, industries, and millions of daily routines inside a space far smaller than this park. Wrangell St. Elias contains no equivalent concentration of cities, yet America chose not to treat that absence as wasted potential. The land was not asked to become productive, fashionable, or convenient before being considered valuable. That difference can be strangely addictive once visitors experience it. In much of Europe, beauty is closely connected to human presence. Stone villages in Italy, vineyards along the Rhine, alpine towns in Switzerland, and carefully maintained paths across Slovenia. Those landscapes are beautiful because people and nature have learned to live shoulder to shoulder. Alaska offers another kind of beauty, one that does not move its furniture when guests arrive. A Slovenian visitor, knowing that her entire country covers around 20,273 square kilometers, might admit that the park changed her understanding of wilderness. Back home, mountains, lakes, towns, and borders remain close enough to share the same journey. In Wrangell St. Elias, the landscape seems to say, with perfect American confidence, "You may come in, but the room was not arranged for you." That attitude explains part of the emotional pull. Modern travelers are accustomed to destinations designed around their comfort, with scenic stops, timed entrances, restaurants, and signs politely telling them where the best photograph should happen. This Alaskan park refuses to behave like a product. It does not chase attention, and perhaps that is precisely why it earns so much of it. One imagined reaction from a visitor from Montenegro captures the feeling well. At home, our entire country is about 13,812 square kilometers. Here, America protected nearly 4 times that area and still did not feel the need to place a coffee shop beside every view. The joke works because the contrast is real. Americans are often portrayed abroad as people who build bigger, consume more, and turn every open space into another commercial opportunity. Yet Wrangell St. Elias tells a quieter story about national character. Sometimes the most impressive American achievement is not what the country constructed, but what it had the confidence to leave alone. For European visitors staying after the World Cup, that discovery can become difficult to forget. They may have arrived expecting a loud country obsessed with spectacle, only to find a place vast enough to make silence feel like the main attraction. Distance stops behaving. A Danish visitor can leave Copenhagen in the morning, cross the Øresund Bridge, have lunch in Malmö, and return home before the day feels particularly ambitious. That rhythm creates a very European confidence about distance. Places may belong to different countries, but they still sit within the reach of a train schedule, a highway exit, or a well-timed cup of coffee. Wrangell St. Elias politely destroys that confidence. The park covers about 53,321 square kilometers, while Denmark's mainland European territory is roughly 42,933. Moldova is around 33,846, Albania about 28,748, and North Macedonia approximately 25,713. The numbers are impressive on paper, but the real cultural surprise begins when a European traveler tries to apply familiar habits to an Alaskan landscape that refuses to cooperate. Someone from Copenhagen may ask what can be seen before dinner, because that is a perfectly reasonable travel question back home. A visitor from Brussels may instinctively search for the next town, another museum, or a railway connection that turns the afternoon into a neat little itinerary. Wrangell St. Elias answers with glaciers, mountains, unpaved roads, and distances that seem to have been measured by a man who owned a pickup truck and considered 4 hours just down the road. That is where the experience becomes strangely addictive. The park removes the pressure to collect destinations like supermarket loyalty points. There is no realistic way to finish it, conquer it, or post a cheerful caption claiming that Alaska has now been fully explored. A traveler may spend an entire day reaching one corner and still leave with the humbling knowledge that the map has barely noticed their effort. One visitor from Albania might put it this way: "At home, I can cross several regions and feel that I have traveled somewhere. Here, I drove for hours, saw 3 mountain ranges, and America still seemed to be warming up." That reaction reveals something larger than geography. In many European cities, travel is built around compression. Paris, Amsterdam, Vienna, and Prague reward people for fitting architecture, food, museums, and neighborhoods into a carefully planned day. Alaska rewards the opposite instinct. It asks visitors to stop squeezing the world into a timetable and accept that one valley may deserve the entire afternoon. Americans understand this almost instinctively. A long drive can be part of the experience rather than an inconvenience standing between 2 attractions. The road becomes a front row seat, the thermos becomes a trusted employee, and a gas station sandwich may suddenly carry the emotional importance of fine dining. For Europeans who remained in the United States after the World Cup, this slower relationship with distance could become one of the country's most unexpected pleasures. They had already discovered that American friendliness was warmer than the headlines suggested. Now Alaska was teaching them that American scale was not an obstacle to endure, but a way of seeing. By the time they returned to the parking lot, the old question, how much can we fit into one day, felt strangely small. Wrangell St. Elias had replaced it with a better one. How long can we stay? States become countries. The most dangerous sentence an American can say to a European visitor is, since you are already here, we could also stop by another state. It sounds casual, almost neighborly, until the map appears and everyone discovers that nearby has been using a completely different dictionary. The 2026 World Cup gave many European supporters their first real lesson in this national scale. They arrived thinking of Dallas, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, and Seattle as host cities within one country, much as London, Paris, Amsterdam, and Brussels sit within one part of Europe. Then they checked the travel times and realized America had quietly placed a continent inside the word domestic. This becomes clearer when the states themselves are compared with familiar European countries. Alaska covers roughly 72 million square kilometers, making it more than 3 times the size of mainland France. Texas occupies about 695,662 square kilometers, which is larger than France's European territory. California covers approximately 423,967 square kilometers, exceeding Germany's roughly 357,588. Even Montana, often treated by Americans as a peaceful place with excellent scenery and an unreasonable number of pickup trucks, is larger than Germany. A German supporter might study that comparison and finally understand why Americans discuss crossing state lines with the seriousness Europeans usually reserve for international travel. California alone contains deserts, snowy mountains, farmland, giant cities, redwood forests, and a coastline long enough to make a weekend itinerary surrender before lunch. Calling it one state feels like describing a Super Bowl stadium as a room with chairs. That scale also explains an American habit that many visitors initially find amusing. People identify themselves strongly by state. A Texan does not merely mention where he lives, he may present Texas as weather system, personality type, culinary opinion, and constitutional mood all at once. Someone from New York, Louisiana, Hawaii, or Montana can sound equally specific because these places are not tiny administrative slices drawn around one city. They carry distinct climates, accents, food traditions, industries, histories, and ideas about what qualifies as acceptable barbecue. Europeans often understand national identity through borders, languages, and centuries of political history. America adds another layer beneath the national flag, where states behave like enormous cultural neighborhoods. A visitor can leave the seafood traditions of New England, enter the southern world of biscuits and college football, continue toward the ranch culture of Texas, and eventually reach California, where the produce looks suspiciously photogenic and everyone appears to know a hiking trail. This variety became addictive for World Cup travelers because every domestic flight seemed to deliver a fresh version of the same country. The flag remained familiar, yet the landscape, food, rhythm, and local pride changed dramatically. They had expected repetition from one host city to another, but America kept changing costumes backstage. An Italian fan may have summarized it best after traveling between matches. In Europe, we visit another country to feel this much difference. In America, you change the license plate and begin an entirely new chapter. That is when the size of the United States stops looking excessive and starts feeling generous. It offers the excitement of crossing cultures without asking visitors to leave the nation, exchange money, or learn another customs declaration. For many Europeans, the hardest part was no longer understanding how large America could be. The harder question was deciding which version of it they wanted to return to first. America saved room. Some European supporters came to the 2026 World Cup with a familiar picture of the United States already fixed in their minds. Endless development, giant parking lots, commercial signs, and cities spreading outward as though concrete had discovered unlimited refills. Then they traveled beyond the stadium districts and found something the usual headlines rarely bother to explain. America may build boldly, but it also protects open land on a scale that can make an entire European itinerary feel carefully folded. The federal government manages roughly 640 million acres of land, close to 28% of the country's total area. Much of it lies across western states such as Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Arizona, and Alaska, where public land is not a decorative strip placed behind a visitor center. It can stretch beyond the road, beyond the visible ridge, and beyond the point where a European traveler begins wondering whether the GPS has quietly joined a witness protection program. That number reveals a cultural choice worth noticing. In densely populated parts of Europe, land has carried human history for centuries. The Netherlands has more than 500 residents per square kilometer, while Belgium has around 400. Villages merge into suburbs, rail lines pass through farmland, and the next church tower often appears before the previous one disappears. This closeness gives Europe its charm, but it also means genuine emptiness is difficult to find. America offers a different luxury, room that has not been assigned an immediate job. One Dutch visitor might admit that this was harder to understand than the size of the highways. Back home, unused land often seems like a planning question waiting for an answer. In the American West, an enormous stretch of desert, forest, or grassland can remain exactly where it is, apparently under no pressure to become apartments, offices, or a retail complex containing 12 stores that all sell the same scented candle. That freedom becomes addictive because modern life rarely allows the eyes to rest. European cities reward attention every few meters with architecture, signs, bicycles, cafes, tram lines, and people moving through shared space. On American public land, the absence becomes the experience. Visitors begin noticing wind, cloud shadows, distant rock formations, and the suspiciously loud sound of their own snack bag. A fan from Belgium could have arrived believing that America's size produced wastefulness, only to leave with a more complicated conclusion. Sometimes abundance creates the confidence to preserve. A country with this much space can build enormous cities and still keep landscapes where no skyline needs to win the argument. That discovery also challenges the simplified version of America often presented overseas. Foreign coverage regularly focuses on conflict because conflict travels well on television. A quiet valley does not shout during a panel discussion, and an empty horizon has never produced a dramatic breaking news banner. Yet these places are part of the country too, and they reveal an American instinct that visitors may never understand until they stand inside it. Some land is valuable precisely because nobody forced it to become profitable. After several weeks in the United States, many European travelers were no longer asking why everything needed to be so large. They had begun asking why their own lives contained so little breathing room. America had not merely shown them more land. It had shown them the pleasure of leaving some of it alone. Roads that never end. European fans who stayed after the 2026 World Cup often discovered that America's true national language was not English, but the road trip. Someone would suggest driving to the next city, another person would check the map, and a perfectly normal American would respond to a 6-hour journey with the relaxed confidence usually reserved for picking up groceries. That reaction makes more sense when you look at the system beneath it. The United States interstate highway system stretches for roughly 48,700 miles, or more than 78,000 kilometers. It links major cities, ports, suburbs, rural counties, mountain regions, and long sections of country where the radio signal seems to have more residents than the roadside. This network did more than connect places. It trained generations of Americans to see distance as something usable. That cultural habit can feel wonderfully strange to a visitor from the Netherlands, where the drive from Amsterdam to Maastricht can take around 2.5 hours. In Belgium, Brussels to Bruges is often close to 90 minutes by car. A British traveler can leave London, reach Manchester in roughly 4 hours under decent conditions, and feel that a serious portion of the country has been crossed. In the United States, 4 hours may simply mean everyone has finished breakfast, chosen a playlist, and finally settled the argument over which gas station has the cleanest restroom. The road itself also carries a different emotional role. In much of Europe, transportation is often judged by how efficiently it disappears from the day. A high-speed train delivers passengers directly into a city center, and the journey works best when nothing memorable happens. American road culture allows the space between destinations to matter. A diner with chrome stools, a giant roadside sign, a small-town baseball field, or a sunset spreading across an entire windshield can become the memory people keep long after the official attraction has faded. One French supporter might have admitted that this freedom felt slightly dangerous in the best possible way. In France, a trip from Paris to Lyon can be completed by high-speed train in about 2 hours. In America, the same amount of time behind the wheel may produce no famous monument at all, yet it can still deliver an odd little town, a homemade pie, and a conversation with someone who addresses strangers as though they have been invited to Thanksgiving. That is the part foreign media rarely captures. American distance is often presented as inconvenience, isolation, or waste. Visitors discover another side once they travel through it. The highway becomes a moving front porch where families talk, friends argue over music, children count state license plates, and strangers trade advice at fuel pumps beside enormous cups of coffee. There is something deeply American about refusing to treat the space between two places as empty. The country turns that space into stories, food stops, motel signs, local accents, and tiny surprises that no carefully optimized city break could schedule. By the end of the trip, some Europeans no longer measured the journey by how quickly they arrived. They measured it by how much America managed to fit between departure and destination. Maybe the greatest surprise was never the size of a single national park. It was realizing how many assumptions about America quietly disappeared the moment people experienced it for themselves. Sometimes a country cannot be understood through headlines alone. It has to be walked, driven, and felt. If this journey changed the way you see America, tell us which fact amazed you most in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that uncover the side of America the world rarely gets to see.